a year, and could not make our mission possible if we didn't have their support. And Yazoo and Corsair for providing our beverages tonight, so that's always a popular sponsor. The mission, if this is your first time to visit us, the mission of the Civic Design Center is to elevate the quality of Nashville's built environment. And one of the key ways that we do that is through garnering and supporting public participation in the process of design in the city. So you all being here tonight is definitely a component of that, and so thank you for joining us, and looking forward to a very good conversation time program. One of the key ways that you can help support the mission of the organization is by becoming a member. And there's information on the back, but memberships help support our programming. We do a lot of fun stuff in addition to the Urban Design Forum, which is this monthly event. We have tours of building sites. We're going on a design field trip to the Little Studio in a few weeks. So there's a lot of different things going on here. And so if you'll check that out. If you have any questions, please let us know and our staff know. We'd love to have you join as a member. Before we get started the program, just a little bit about logistics. We have one restroom that's just back through the second set of double doors. And then we also have, if there's a line there, some of our staff can help you into the lobby of the building. Just next door here, there's a few more restrooms there. So I want to just recognize the people that Mayor Berry's brought along with her tonight from Metro. We have Doug Sloan here from Planning, Steve Bland from the MTA, Angie Hubbard's here from MDHA, Mary Beth Eicher is with the Mayor's Office, Aaron Hoffman-Shield, the Mayor's Office, Caroline Vincent with the Arts Commission, Adams Carroll with the Planning Department, and if I've forgotten anybody else, Mark Sturdivant, also, sorry Mark, your name didn't make the list. Yeah, it's on the second list. Yeah. Well, it is a wonderful pleasure to welcome Megan Berry, our mayor, to the Design Center tonight. This is her first official visit here as being mayor, which is, what, 5 months now? And it's a great pleasure and honor. I think we enjoy conversations with her and are very much looking forward to the conversation about how design plays a part in the city and what her vision is for us moving forward. And I think the format is going to be a short presentation, and then we'd love this to be kind of a discussion, and there's people up here to answer and go back and forth with your questions. So let's welcome our mayor.
Thanks. He came back for his beer. Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to, Angie, where are you? Did you want to come up here and sit? Because there may be questions. So bring your beer. Yes, come on up. Gary, thanks for inviting me. And I also wanted to give a special shout out to former council member Peter Westerholm, who is here. I had the pleasure of serving with Peter on the Metro Council, and he cares deeply and passionately about these issues that we're talking about. It's always good to see his face as he continues the fight, the good fight. And I also wanted to just say thanks to Dave Powell and all of the Civic Design folks who make this possible. And you all serve a great purpose when we talk about what Nashville needs and what the built environment needs to look like. So I know that this has been titled New Mayor, New Vision. Well, I'm a new mayor part, so now let me talk about the new vision part. And I think it's not really that different from what we've always seen, what we see for how we are going to design and build our city. There are some general principles that I believe that we have to adhere to, and it is that we have to make it easier to get around Nashville, and we have to make it affordable to live here. And we have to do that in a way that coordinates those two goals and also creates a healthy environment. And that's really the vision. And the vision then gets translated into lots of little pieces. So let's talk about housing. Let's talk about when we build new housing. We have to make sure that it's on transit lines. I know that this seems like really basic stuff, but at the end of the day, if we aren't deliberate, this stuff doesn't happen. And I can tell you that my team and I talk about this all the time. If you want to have certain outcomes, you've got to start at the beginning to make sure that everybody's collaborating. That if you are focused on a transit line going where there's housing, that involves two different people, Angie and Steve, And also a whole bunch more beyond that. Because what we've seen in the past is we have a tremendous amount of growth happening. And I was actually just in LA over the weekend, and I will tell you, our growth here is fabulous. They're going to have a referendum on the ballot in November that will prohibit any new growth in LA for 2 years. Now, I can't even imagine having to be in that environment at the moment, to be so afraid of growth that that's your reaction. So we have to grow, we have to have new transit solutions, we have so much energy around transit right now. In fact, sitting up here with me are 3 folks who are specifically focused on transit in my office, plus Steve Bland over at MTA. So we are putting a tremendous focus on this because I really believe that the vision for Nashville on transit is multimodal. We've talked about that all along. I spent my day up on the Hill today where there are bills that people want to pass that will say that our state dollars are not going to be allowed to build any bike lanes. That is just such short-sighted thinking. And when we think about what we have to do to build a complete street, when we need a sidewalk, we need a bikeway, we need pedestrian safety, we need bike safety, all of these pieces have to fit, but they also have to fit next to housing. And the housing and the transit are critical. And if we think about urban design and how it's built by, whether it's metro or the private sector, it has to be cohesive. And that's where Doug comes in. Because our planning commission and the community out here has spent a tremendous amount of energy and time creating Nashville Next. We actually have a roadmap and a plan of how to do this. And a lot of us can look at urban design, we recognize good design, but if we don't harness it to create the space, those deliberate spaces, then it doesn't matter. Because ultimately, if we don't take all of that Nashville Next components and build on them and just put it on the shelf, we're not going to have a city that we all love. And we had, I think, 18,000 people participated in Nashville Next. We were given a very good plan of how the community wants to see us grow. So we're working on those strategies in my office to incorporate those Nashville Next principles. And as you know, with MTA, we're just getting started on all of the different processes that are out there. You've got MTA, RTA in Motion that was released last month. My office right now is working very closely with ULI and Gabe Klein. We're focused on some community infrastructure goal setting processes, which we're calling Gear Up 2020. And you'll see those recommendations come out toward June and July. And we also have 2 other very important master planning processes that are coming out of my office. That is the one for parks and greenways, because we need parks and green space, and another for sidewalks and bikes, and that's through BPAC. We're also focused on that. They're going to be focused on how we move people around, because what I don't want us to get caught in the transit conversation is to forget that there are lots of ways to move people around. We need buses, we need BRT, we need planes, trains, automobiles, we need autonomous cars, and we need all these wonderful things that are going to get us around. In fact, I did spend a little time, as I mentioned today, with one legislator who was focused very specifically on saying that the gas tax, you don't really need to worry about the gas tax, you don't need to increase it, because in 5 years we're all going to be in autonomous cars. Who believes that? Really? Come on, I was promised a flying car when I was little. I figured an autonomous car is like the next best thing. But at the end of the day, funding is always the issue. And with the MTA process right now, I hope you've all gone and contributed your thoughts about what we want to see. I think what's so powerful about that initiative is that it puts a price tag to things. We actually have to spend money on things that are important to us. We just went after a grant from the Smart Cities Grant, which is $40 million. If we get this Smart City Grant, it means that we are going to be able to spend $40 million on smart technology throughout our city. It's really exciting. And this was actually a state, a federal, a local effort to come together to make this happen. So we are one of 77 cities that applied. I think only 40 of them, though, actually qualify, because you actually have to have a certain number of people. But we've decided that even if we don't get this grant, we have to be moving forward on this technology anyway. And we want to make sure that we are creating the technology of the future of transit and not building the past. And I think that is where the autonomous car conversation comes in. It is where we talk about parking and this idea that if you have autonomous cars and they are spending 100% of their time on the road, then they're not dormant, so you don't need as many parking garages. You don't need that kind of infrastructure. And I think when we think about how we design our cities, that's going to be really important. And that also ties back into the affordable housing component. We're also in the process right now, I know that many of you paid attention to the great work that Doug and the Planning Commission are doing. He has managed to bring the advocates and the developers together to oppose something. They're all on the same page. So thank you, Doug. It's what you do. And so clearly, being able to figure those pieces out, again, spending time on the Hill today, there's legislation out there as well that will prohibit us from mandatory inclusionary zoning. And my conversation with the state legislatures and the governor has been, don't cut us off from tools that we may need. Like, we're not doing this at the moment, but don't take something away from us, because we have to build housing here. And we have to build housing for low income, for moderate income, for middle income, and for people who are unhoused. We have to hit all of those marks. And thankfully, you're going to take care of that, right? So that's why Angie's up here. Design elements that I like in our city. Let me just give you a few. I love that curve of the Music City Center. I think that's really, really cool. I love the swings over at the Ascend Theater. I love that that is our front porch, and that design element was created to celebrate that piece. I love the staircase that goes up from the Gulch Crossing up to DeMont Street. I think that's really just a wonderful element going up the side of that building. I love that we incorporated the old tree that was at Bellevue when the new Bellevue Library was constructed. There was a tree on that side that they took down, and they created the most beautiful piece of art inside the library as a memory of that tree. I love that we have green space where there used to be a parking lot outside of the new Southeast Library, the community center out there at Antioch. How many of you all have spent time out there? When I was on the campaign trail, it was one of the voting sites, and we did a lot of community meetings out there. I mean, it's so cool to walk out and see this green space where there was a parking lot. And I love also that we have that outdoor learning center for students out in Goodlettsville, the library. How many of you guys have been there? You guys need to get out more. Other things that I love that we have benches places where people can just sit. And I love that we're maintaining our urban landscape. I love on 2nd Avenue that there are trees, and I don't want them to go away. Thank you. And I think that trees, and we know that trees actually attract people to come and be part of the community. So, yeah, cutting them down, I don't know. And things I don't like. I have a list of that right now. Things I don't like: orange paint, blue paint, green paint, more orange paint, a lot of orange paint, especially ones that are in the triangles. And did I mention orange paint? So we've been working very closely with a lot of the folks who spray paint, trying to get them to use water-soluble paint, because right now it's permanent. And we've actually made some inroads on that, and thank you for that, Mark. Mark has done that heavy lifting on that. And so at the end of the day, it looks really junky if you're spray painted everywhere. The other things I hate: overhead power lines. Hate those. So they're not going to go away overnight, but clearly, and there's a cost component. But if in 50 years we don't want to have power lines, we have to say, how much is it going to cost? How do we amortize that over 50 years? How do we start burying them now? It's not going to be for me, it's not going to probably be for you, but it's going to be for our kids and the kids that come after us, so that we actually have space where we have green and we have trees, and they're not like this. Other things I just want to mention, because I think that there's a lot going on right now in our city. And a lot of the things that I've just mentioned were the $40 million grant, but we also, downtown right now, have 25 cranes in the air. There's $2 billion worth of construction investment going on in Nashville right now. We are not a city that's dying. When I spent time today with the mayor from Memphis, people leave Memphis every day. They're desperately worried about the impact that the hall tax is going to have. If the hall tax is rolled back, that's $15 million a year for Memphis. And when we look at what other cities are doing, we are at a really good time. We're not Flint, Michigan. Our water quality is good. You can turn on the tap and you can drink it. We have challenges though, and you all know that. One of the things that I've come in to talk about specifically has been youth violence. And I know that that's a little off of the design piece here, but it's really not. Because how you design a city ultimately is how people feel safe and how they're engaged with the community. So we have done now several engagements with youth. We have 2 more to go. And we are listening to them tell us about what they need. And so much of what they are telling us is that they need opportunity and they need hope. And that comes from the built environment. It comes from having spaces that you can congregate that are safe. It comes from being able to go to a community center that's open longer than just 5 o'clock at night. It comes from being in a school that is LEED certified, that you can enjoy the environment. And it comes also from being able to walk on sidewalks and streets that are safe, and that all of those pieces together are going to make a difference. But what's really going to make a difference for these youth are to see other opportunities. And that's my challenge to you all tonight. You all work in companies, you all work in places. I need you to think about hiring youth. Boston has a population of 650,000 just like us. They put 10,000 youth to work every summer. Our numbers are way low. It's a public-private partnership. 3,000 folks in government step up, 2,000 from the not-for-profit sector, and 5,000 from the for-profit sector. They make that happen. That's my goal by 2017, that we have 10,000 kids employed, and we're working on that right now. But that's a community, I need you all to help me with that. Because let me tell you, if you have a kid who has artistic capability, I want them to know that design starts with a drafting table, some pens, and that they can create really beautiful things. And they're not going to see that unless they have those experiences, and only you all can help make that happen. So that's one of my challenges to you. So when we talk, going back to talking about what Nashville needs to be, it hasn't changed. Nashville has to be a place where you can get around, you can afford to live here, you can get on a greenway, you can send your kid to a school that you love, and you can make sure that we stay a warm and welcoming place for everybody. And that happens by making sure that we build buildings and spaces that reflect that. So that's what I believe. That's what I want to see. It's going to take, the devil's always in the details, right? So now you can ask me details. And then I can ask Mark, or Mary Beth, or Steve, or one of the folks up here who can answer your questions. So ask me questions. That's probably the easiest way to get this started.
So what is your vision for public transportation?
What is my vision for public transportation? Well, it's multimodal, it's complex, there's not one silver bullet. I mean, I think the engagement process that we're using with MTA right now is to say, all right, here are 3 different scenarios, lots of different pieces underneath them. What is it that you want to see as a community? Every piece of this has a price tag. And so how much are we going to collectively spend, and where do we want to move? In the urban core, the reason why we went after the Smart City grant was because we need to create the opportunity for that first and last mile. So, at the moment, we need more buses, we need them to run more often. I mean, there's all that piece. The bus on shoulder today failed, I understand. Is that right? Do you guys know? that there was legislation that would allow the bus on shoulder. I think it failed. But we have to be creative. We've got to think outside the box on that stuff. There's many things, and there's lots of things. We have to do all of them, and we have to do them really inexpensively. Yeah, and I want it done yesterday, by the way.
Some cities that we might look up to as inspiration for what we want to be when we grow up. I had a leader from DC who came to Nashville and asked, there's so much going on here. And he asked me, who do y'all want to be when you grow up? And I was stumped. I was like, we're Nashville. We're our own thing, right? But it's a good question when we're looking for other places to be inspired by that, maybe overcome some of the challenges that we're facing. What are some cities you look at?
So let's take transit for a second. Denver, Salt Lake City are both great examples of where they've gone in and they've had the ability to create regional partnerships where you've got a funding mechanism that does light rail. I think light rail is a great option if we can collectively come together as a region and say we need these collectors from different places. I would love to see some kind of a mechanism to get you from the airport to downtown that is mass transit. And that would be ideal. We have so many visitors that come here and they get out and they go, I don't know how to get around here. But once they get downtown, they can take a paddle tower, so it's all good. So that's that. And then on Boston, that's youth very well. They have a great approach to youth. LA out there, they got 44,000 homeless folks on their streets to the point where now the homeless are actually living on the sidewalks and on the overpasses. Mayor Garcetti announced last week that he's going to put $100 million into solving the homeless problem, and we have folks here who are unhoused. That's another vision to say, okay, how do we do that? So there's lots of great cities out there doing a lot of good stuff. Yeah.
How are you going to create your nexus for the, as someone who works with at-risk youth, how do you create your nexus between the private world and the at-risk youth to kind of create those partnerships? Are you going to use the Oasis Center, or are you going to...
So we have worked with Oasis. They've been part of the youth violence, and the National Career Advancement Center is doing a lot of our workforce development. So what we're hearing from the private sector is a pushback saying, oh gosh, I don't want to have to hire, drug test, screen, pay, all those things. So I'd rather just give you money. Well, that's fine, I want your money too. But I also want you to hire one of these kids, because that ultimately is the goal. So the Career Development Center, I think, is going to be the way we're going to manage all of this through. So private sector doesn't have to deal with that. We will deal with all of this because you're just going to put them to work. Yeah.
Jasmine Miller from Oasis Center.
Yes.
So we have a lot of youth who are trying to access jobs, obviously. And a big issue for our youth is transportation, especially for our youth out in Antioch. I was just curious to know, do we have any plans for making sure all of our high schools get bus stops, because John Everton still doesn't have them, and also local transportation to and from community colleges is a huge issue. I have kids who live 5 miles from National State. It takes them 2 hours to get there. Just curious.
Yeah, Steve.
Thank you for the easy question.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, the challenge in transportation design is the way Nashville is laid out. You all know this is the many-to-many destination points, and where mass transit works best is when you have really strong corridors. Some of the innovations, when Mayor Berry talks about the in-motion process, a lot of what we'll call the coverage out of that has been light rail here or commuter rail there. To be frank, some of the most exciting stuff, I think, really follows the smart cities applications, and we've had some really encouraging talks with some of the alternate providers, the Lyfts, the Ubers, the Cargos, the cab companies, and say, okay, how do we make this a seamless experience? The STRIDE program, the PASS program for MPS youth, was a huge step up, and what was really remarkable, I think, about that program was, for years, Metro Nashville public school kids have been using public transportation to get to school. When STRIDE came into place, and basically any kid with an MMPS high school ID can ride transit anytime, anywhere, we held 40% of our school year ridership over the summer. So kids are riding jobs or riding recreation, so they continue to use the system, which for me means future customers. The challenge is, and when Mayor Barry says building housing on transit lines, extending that to public facilities and places people go, because frankly, when we deal with locations that are sort of out in the middle there, for us to run traditional transit to carry 3 people to those locations is really tough. So the short term, hopefully the short term solution becomes more of those demand responsive modes and kind of opening that up in a seamless way through how we pay fares and how we do trip planning and where your bus is. I'm surprised you didn't give us a shout out on real-time information.
Yeah, well, there you go.
You beat me up on that the first one.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you already solved that.
So I think those are some of the shorter and longer term. They really, coming back to what the Civic Design Center does, is looking at the built environment to see that those locations are accessible to everyone and not just folks who have access to a place.
Well, and let me add, because Steve and I were having this conversation a couple of days ago. One of the things we had last week was some snow events, which prevented kids from getting to school on several days. And I think the last day that they didn't go to school was a day that by probably 8 o'clock, a lot of that had thawed and you could have gotten to school. And so, Steve and I had this conversation the other day. One of the things that MMBS had said was, well, you know what, part of our problem about not being able to do that 2-hour late start is because the buses, the schedule doesn't work. And Steve said, well, I've never been asked. If you ask, I'm sure we can figure this out. So we're now going to be able to figure it out so that the next time we have a snow event, we could actually start 2 hours late and still get kids to school to get some component. But I think that's a really good example of the fact that there are just conversations that need to be had to get the connectivity. Yeah.
I have a question about conversations that may or may not be happening about ecosystem services, the value of our collective green space and urban ecology and wildlife corridors, as we experience this rapid growth. Is there anything being done to collectively value that for clean air, clean water, recreational space for the future?
So one of the things that I mentioned was that a master planning for greenways and green space in Nashville. I'm concerned. I think we need to have a good idea of what is there and how we start to preserve it. And at the moment, we need to know exactly what's there so that we can make sure that we are being very deliberate in that.
Other progressive cities that are quantifying the value.
Yeah, the Parks and Greenways Master Plan, as part of that process that's going to take place this summer, they're going to be looking at, is there a role for the Parks Department on helping preserve some of the privately owned land? So, some of the things like the Land Trust does with conservation overlays. Can Metro help facilitate some of that and public-private partnerships? Because the Parks Department owns quite a bit of land and really needs to be focusing on how to program that. But there's a lot of privately owned, suburban farmland within Davidson County that needs preserved as well.
Yeah.
2 parts, 2 separate questions. First question is, how much consideration do you guys take into the wonderful things that they're doing here at the National Civic Design Center? Things like last year had forums on capping the freeway, an example in Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, Texas. We had a presentation here on doing that over the Music Road, the Lumber Inn, Gulch area, as well as they did a National Civic Design's also done this great thing, which I think is a fabulous idea, creating a canal on the east side and the east bank, on the other side of the Titan Stadium, on the west side of the 24, creating almost like a San Antonio River walk, kind of hitting 2 birds with 1 stone, creating development park, or 3 birds, development parks, and helping flood systems and like that. So how much consideration are you guys taking into the civic design and what they're producing and the great ideas that they're coming up with and trying to implement those within the city? Second part, separate, is how are you, as your vision, your mayor, your administration, preventing urban sprawl? Okay, we're spread to Sumner and Wilson and Rutherford and Williamson County. Places like Portland have created condensed areas. And although we compare ourselves to Portland and Charlotte and Austin, we don't have near the density that they do to have in transit and those kind of things. So how are you, or I guess as the administration, helping to spur development, job growth, increase density, but not like living on top of each other within Davidson County and creating us, more similar to Charlotte, Boston, Portland, et cetera. So two separate questions, but sorry.
So let's do the density one
Yeah.
first.
Really, you had a great answer for the Civic Design Center.
Well,
too. So
you're
it's a
going to take that one next.
Okay.
so.
Well, first, I got to point out that unlike Portland, we don't have the ocean limiting and the mountains limiting kind of how we can control growth. Their development area that they've limited growth to is topography. It lends itself to that. We can control Davidson County, and what we're trying to do in Davidson County is a balance of preserving the neighborhoods that we have today, and still allowing some infill into that development into different neighborhoods, but really trying to concentrate density along our corridors. Because if we pay attention to our core downtown area and encourage development, and I think the number of cranes that you see in the sky showed we're doing a good job of that. And then we try to focus our growth and density entitlements to increase density along the corridors, then we can help steer the growth there. During the recession, one of the things we did was we took a proactive step to go ahead and down Charlotte and upzone the properties along Charlotte, the Charlotte corridor. And we did that, and parts of the West End, and we did that in part to try and drive development onto the corridors, create the entitlements that would work as a beacon to development to come into those areas. And we were, it was during the recession, so we were trying, but we built on that and looked at whether it's Gallatin Pike or whether, again, Charlotte or Knowles Road. As we look at the policies that we did Nashville Next about what type of rezonings we should allow, our highest density areas that we focused on was along those corridors to do just what you're talking about. Nashville, and I think to the point that being made earlier, we're not another city. We're different. And we have very different challenges, but we also have very different assets. And one of the things that we have is we have these small commercial nodes that have grown up all over our community. And we've got to nurture those, protect the neighborhoods that are around them, but nurture growth around those commercial nodes. That will also help with transit because it creates these very natural locations for transit to stop and for people to be able to access, whether that's through bikes or through walking. If you create those nodes and then you tie those together with your transit, then it will be something different than we see in other cities. But for our county, I think it will put the density where we need it, and it will set the platform for the mass transit along our corridors and into our downtown area. And as for the Civic Design Center, Gary and everybody here, we look at them as an inspiration to us. Because capping downtown, after I read the study that y'all worked on, happened to soon after that I went out to Dallas and happened to go to the park that you're talking about. And just before that, I was at a conference in Seattle where they built their convention center on top of their interstate. And it really got our wheels turning in the planning department. And one of the things that I think we need to focus on and start to think about is talk about the return on investment for something like that. That's not a small project. It's extraordinarily expensive. But if you stop and you think about what does it do for property values surrounding it, what does it do for mobility from Midtown into downtown? Now all the people and all the apartments and the growth that we see in Midtown and Vanderbilt and Music Row, they'll be able to walk into downtown if you bridge it like that. So it's a transportation opportunity, it's an investment opportunity that we can get tax returns on, and it's something great for our city to create some green space out of what right now is a concrete barrier. So we closely follow everything that happens.
Steve had a comment on that.
Yeah, I think probably Dr. Allen tied the two together. And we kind of wear dual hat at the MTA. We run the MTA service, which is the Nashville Davidson County service. We also manage the Regional Transportation Authority service, which is the 10 counties. The first thing I think in terms of optimism and talking to a lot of the regional mayors, if you talk to the mayor of Ashland City or the mayor of Cheatham County or the mayor of Robert encouragement. There are folks out there saying, how can we do this in the right way? The other piece is tying on to exactly what Doug is saying, and where frankly I would request the help of the Civic Design Center is, so when we came out with our higher end scenario, with light rail lines and all of this stuff in these corridors, Gallatin, Charlotte, Nolensville, Murfreesboro, and kind of we call it light rail going through North Nashville and up toward Clarksville and National City via commuter rail. Frankly, those corridors can absolutely not justify that investment today. We're making the bet, putting that scenario out there on Nashville Next's preferred future, that infill development occurs, that it gets dense within reason, that we create that walkable environment. And one of the challenges we've seen so far, I would say on that higher end scenario, and they've just come out, so you're going to see this debate really pick up over the next couple months. We must be pretty close to right, because about half the people are saying, not big enough, not bold enough. And the other half are saying, are you out of your minds? We're never going to be able to get there. So that's sort of what my bellwether is. But a lot of it is trying to envision, well, Gallatin Road and light rail, how does that work? Because right now I'm standing in a drainage ditch to wait for the bus, and I can't cross the street. So frankly, well, I mean, am I wrong? Sounds like it is. Aaron and I were talking about this before the session, that we really rely on, frankly, the creative types that are in this room to help us get what that, what Doug's plan, looks like on paper, and say, oh yeah, okay, I get that. Yeah, that's what could happen over time, and that would be pretty cool. Not for everybody. I mean, people are going to want to live on their, 2 acres in Robertson County or what have you, but that there's some alternative, and it's not just, plunking this big train down in the middle of the street blocking the rest of the traffic.
Well, and Steve, also in the envision scenario, that's the most expensive one, aren't there trolley cars?
Yeah, I refer to it as the transit potpourri. We would rival Boston and Philadelphia, so pretty much one of everything. So, yeah, so.
Everybody wants a trolley car. Anytime I go out, can we get a trolley car?
Yeah, the streetcar lines are line, Germantown,
Yeah.
Western, toward Vanderbilt.
First of all, I'd like, as someone who's been involved with the Civic Design Center since nearly its beginning, I want to say how much pride I think a lot of us are feeling to have you all up there thinking about this holistically and talking about the things that we've been striving for so long. And so we're really excited and optimistic. And Steve hit on probably my biggest concern right now, and one that we're seeing in the Planning Commission already, and that is the pushback to Nashville Next, and the pushback to the corridor, to growth and development along the corridors. So we all know, I think everyone in this room knows that our corridors lack the density and the critical mass to support the transit. How can the Nashville Civic Design Center, ULI, Planning Commission, all of us work together to help educate the general public about the necessity of doing exactly what you all are talking about?
Hunter, that's a great question, and I think where a lot of that is helping council members, because a lot of this is driven through the councilmanic process, and I have found that oftentimes neighborhoods that are in opposition of density, and you're right, we're starting to see some of that come up, is because they can't envision what it's going to be. And so if you say we're going to put 650 units on an acre, like, not that I'm talking about anything specific, but all of a sudden it's like, we can't do that. I don't know what that would look like, and isn't that, but ultimately there will be, and this is just the downside, there will be pain before there's progress, because in order to get the density, you're going to have to build the density, and that's going to drive then the transit. The transit, as you just said, it's very difficult to justify building a train all the way out to someplace that's going to have 3 riders on it. But if you start to build that density, it makes a whole difference in that. So the help from you all is the creative collective, which is to say, this is what it actually looks like. This is how it fits into the built environment. This is how it can fit into your neighborhood. It's not scary or frightening, and I think that's really helpful. So, Gary, that's for you. Yes.
I think the other thing is also the opportunity to pilot projects, and we were here with Gary last week talking about some of the Complete Streets pilot projects that we're going to be talking about, and that again will be an opportunity for people to envision what a lot of this will look like. And I was just asking Doug, you people in this room know, there's a book out there that talks about density, and it shows you like 10 different, I'm blanking on the name. Envisioning density, very creative name. but that's the type of thing that I think is really important. I mean, people think density and they think of a 30-story high-rise tower. And there are usually 10 or 15 different versions that can achieve the exact same type of density. And being able, like Steve said, we are not the designers. And so being able to actually envision what that looks like, I think will have a really big impact.
I would add one other thing too, is that, Hunter, I'm seeing a lot of pushback, and even from council members that were involved in Nashville Next, some people that have been kind of shocked that I'm hearing a pushback from it, especially this early on in their term. But I think if you listen to them, and you listen to the people in the neighborhoods that are concerned about it, a lot of it's driven by traffic. It's driven about how long does it take me to get to where I'm trying to go. And if you put another 300 or 400 units between me and that route, well, I'm against that. And so how we steer, again, the transportation, it is really the hurdle that we've got to figure out how to get over. But I think that you find that most of it's being driven about transportation and not necessarily design. When they get down to it, they love the restaurant at the ground floor of that apartment building. But they just don't want to take any longer to get home or get to work.
One last question.
Yeah, so I had a question kind of very related to that, specifically about the pikes. So as we know, pikes kind of tend to be the problem in a lot of neighborhoods. Not only are they the hardest to get down, especially if there's new density, but they're also the most dangerous and the most inaccessible, whether or not you're on foot or bike, more often even on transit, as Steve mentioned. So I think there's going to be a real challenge in the future to kind of not only talk about the development, but talk about the pikes are going to have to change. We can't keep 8 lanes in all of our pikes and have a pedestrian-friendly environment. So how do we kind of tackle that really big challenge where we're going to have to shift? We can't all drive everywhere and trying to explain that to people who have years.
Hello, Doug Sloan again. So one of the problems with pikes, and really that we have, is we've developed with these strip centers with these curb cuts that go the full length of blocks. And believe it or not, that is a huge piece of what's slowing down traffic along your pikes. So getting those lots consolidated so that you get larger developments and you push the curb cuts off of your pikes and push them back into the alleys and side streets, it's a huge piece of the answer to making the pikes work better as we have them today. Now, part of that, the hurdle to that is a lot of those lots are also fairly narrow lots. So we've got to contemplate how you kind of slip into the neighborhood a little bit, maybe a lot or two off of the pike so that you create a deep enough lot so that you can develop on. But you can see quickly how once you start to talk about that, how the neighborhoods are saying, wait a second, now you're taking commercial and you're creeping into my neighborhood that you said you were protecting. And so that conversation is something we're going to have as a community, and whether that's Knowlesville Road or whether that's Charlotte or, name the pike, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. But that dynamic and that conversation in the community is something we're just going to have to wrestle with and get through and allow developers to consolidate these lots so that we can have these larger developments and get rid of a lot of these block-wide curb cuts, and that'll smooth it out. I absolutely agree. Adding more lanes, that's not being easy.
Yeah, putting down more asphalt isn't going to solve our problem.
One last question. Yeah, just to piggyback off that, Mayor, you mentioned the 25 cranes around town, and someone who lives close to downtown and works downtown and drives around midtown all the time. It seems to me that within the construction industry, when they're building these big places, it seems we're closing down a lane of traffic, we're getting rid of the sidewalk. Have there been conversations in planning about how to either encourage them not to do that unless it's absolutely necessary, or figure out a way to force them to do it?
Pretty sure that's my question.
Pretty sure.
we are trying to work with the organization that closes lanes and sidewalks. Man, I think that's your issue, right?
Yeah, if you can go down Music Road, you probably figure it out.
Right, to have a more coordinated effort about how we do that. Because, look, this growth, I think we're all honest, it jumped on all of us. My office went from how do you keep things going, how do you keep people at work, to just overwhelmed, just swamped. And it happened like that. And so we went literally from trying to find policies to keep the engine running to suddenly trying to figure out a way to control an engine that's running at full blast. And so a lot of the things we weren't dealing with before, which is multiple large developments in a small area, Midtown is a great example of that. We just now need to stop and look at our policies. Okay, how are we taking in the applications for closing lanes? How are we taking in the applications for blocking our sidewalks? Is there a way, can we come up with standard designs to keep the sidewalks open so that we continue to allow the sidewalks so people can continue to walk along those streets? And also, when we're putting together plans about if we're going to close the street, let's don't just think about the street. What are the alternate routes for bikes and for pedestrians to work around there? That was something that we ran into with the state, with the bridge, the Fast Fix 5, I think it was. And so they hadn't really thought about that, about, oh, wait, people bike along these corridors.
The state doesn't think people bike.
we informed them that the government bikes. That got T-Dot's attention. And so we are, but it's new to us. We've not seen this level of growth. So we're working with the people who issue the permits to try and figure out a way that we can do it in a more coordinated effort. But that conversation is underway.
Well, and Jim, I'm sure you, like me, the first day I came around the roundabout and that lane was open, I was like, oh my God, awesome. It was a celebration.
So I just want to thank you so much for your generosity.
Well, I want to thank these guys for everything, honestly. I have